Not many people understood his importance and his help. He had a broad plan. Many times, Mr. Philip and Mrs. Elizabeth saw each other's help and love. However, after 70 years of love, Mr. Philip made a disappointing decision. Mr. Philip no longer wanted to live with Elizabeth. This choice made people wonder what happened. Was this decision a disappointing decision or a disappointing decision? For many years, the truth remained a broad plan, but in a disappointing report, the girl Anne, along with Charles and Andrew, finally saw the real reason. That was the reason, their reasons and their reasons. Follow along as we uncover the untold story of why Philip didn't live with Elizabeth in Beijing, and just found out why Philip didn't live with her. Anne, Philip and Elizabeth's only daughter, has left everyone disappointed with her disappointment. For many years, there have been many doubts about why Prince Philip chose to leave Beijing and not live with Princess Elizabeth in her final year. But now, the truth has come to an end. The girl Anne, often called her father's enemy, shared the real reason behind her father's decision, and her brothers, Prince Charles and Prince Andrew, supported her cause. Follow along as we find out all the stories. In a case between the family often encountered in the national family, the girl and her father, Philip, share a reason for meeting close. She is called her father's girl, perhaps because their similar issues are unexpected, easy, romantic, strong, and romantic, and with a clear sense of satisfaction, what is often used by others. They both enjoyed suffering and had little compassion for those who did not understand things as quickly as they did, but what remained was their trust. Any Philip or the girl and could see fault in the other. Instead, they informed each other much while keeping trust. Over the years, the girl and saw what happened between her family, while her brothers were often contacted with their national duties, and knew the truth and saw for the first time what was under her eyes and the beautiful national family that her family introduced to the world. But that's not all. Philip also informed his daughter about the difficulties he was having in his family with Elizabeth. However, to truly understand why Philip chose to leave, we need to go back to the beginning, when it all began, even before Anne and her brothers were born. Miss Elizabeth. First of all, Miss Elizabeth met French Philip, a television presenter in a culture, in 1934. He was 13 years old and she was only 8 years old. However, nothing happened between them until 5 years later they met again. During this time, Elizabeth was 13 years old and Philip was 18 years old. However, Elizabeth was not at peace. Her parents went to visit the army camp of New England, Dartmouth, Devon. They were to meet some military councils and French Philip was one of them. But things did not go as planned due to problems with a butt and beef while meeting. During this time, before meeting the military council as they should have met, they spent time at the army house and French Philip came to join the young girls. He was one of the few who did not get sick from the plague. Eventually, Philip got bored sitting in the house and asked the young girl to go out. Instead, he started playing croquet, dropped out of football, and developed a spirit of uselessness. This thing met the girl Elizabeth, and from that moment, the young girl fell in love. Later, the young girl said that the young girl never looked at another person after that day. After meeting each other, the young girl developed love for Philip and began to respond to him when he used with the National Army during the war years. Elizabeth even kept a picture of him in her sitting room as a token. In 1946, Philip returned to the stateroom in his relationship with Elizabeth Blossom. In January, he proposed to her at Balmoral. In a photo from 1946 he said, "I was left behind in the war and saw the victory. I was given the opportunity to rest and to use myself again. Loved completely and without reservation, made all things love of people and even the problems looked small and easy." However, despite the photo, Elizabeth's father, King George VI, left a family between them. He feared that Elizabeth was too young and would fall in love with the first person she met. Perhaps she would meet someone and change her mind about Philip. So the military family is still at peace about Philip's intention to date Elizabeth. In addition, there is a bit of a confrontation with Philip's plan in the military family. In the case that Philip is a military family person and faces Victoria, making him and Elizabeth third best friends. Many people found Philip too young. too peaceful, too simple, too innocent, too unintelligent to date Elizabeth. But Elizabeth was natural. She used her sense of Philip and decided to date him. Less than a year later, in July 1947, the day after Elizabeth's 21st birthday, an announcement was made about their meeting. Before meeting Elizabeth, Philip had to give up his surname and become a person of the British president. Philip did this out of love for Elizabeth. Although he was informed in the British presidency, Lord Chancellor of Canterbury Philip was informed in the British presidency in March 1947. He also informed a last-name face ban. In February 20, 1947, Lord Chancellor Elizabeth informed Philip and the British presidency in London. They were then announced in March 1947 in Hampshire, England, at the home of Philip's father, Earl Mountbatten, but Philip had no idea that his life would change in ways he never imagined. After their appointment, Philip continued to serve in the army. Quickly, a year later, they had their first son, Charles, following their daughter, England. Philip's life progressed and they were eventually sent to Malta. Lord Elizabeth went with him while her son was back in England. They enjoyed a fairly normal life for a long time, but everything in their lives would change. In 1952, Major George fell ill and died. It was only 5 years after they got engaged. Elizabeth and Philip's world had changed. Elizabeth, now 25 years old, had become a demon. And Philip, now 30, had to adjust to a new reality. They had thought they would have more time to live well and enjoy themselves before Elizabeth became Lord Chancellor. But plans had other plans. Now, Elizabeth will become a demon while their son, Philip, will become what? Not a high priest, but someone who will become their daughter, the demon Elizabeth. Even though this has been known for a long time, this will destroy their entire system. Elizabeth's system means that they have to settle any desires they have in the army. For a man who has become a minister, becoming a minister immediately cannot be easy. And let's not forget, this is 1950, a time when it is very easy for a wife to be destroyed and controlled by his wife. It is more difficult for Philip, because his wife is the #1 citizen, which means the first duty before the family. It was the first of a long struggle for Philip, a struggle that would destroy his decision to live alongside the devil for years to come. But how did it happen? Watch to find out. The mission of the struggle. Elizabeth and Philip went to Kenya when Philip reported her death. Elizabeth knew what was expected of her and she immediately returned to the International. Before she arrived, Elizabeth became the Devil Elizabeth II. But the name Philip remains unchanged. She is not called the Devil's Devil. Rather, she is called the Devil's Devil. But, ladies and gentlemen, Philip protected her and left the international struggle to help the International. But that was only the first of many changes. Then they moved from her home, Clarence's home, to Buckingham International. On February 2, 1953, a year after Elizabeth became international, her history took place at the London International Centre. Then, Canterbury International became international. Philip became the new international, and was expected to become her international. But could he become this international? It is easier if one expects to become one's international, leaving the desire and dream to help Elizabeth II international. Philip also had to expect to go a little behind her before she became international instead of beside her. He later announced that he thought he would have a long life in international, but it soon became clear that there was no hope and he had to join. Philip accepted his new reality and tried to make the best of it. However, the first confrontation occurred between Elizabeth and Philip after she became an international. One of the most important confrontations occurred when Philip's grandmother, Louise Ducky Mountbatten, announced that Mountbatten's international was now an international. That meant that since Elizabeth was married, her son would be treated as her wife. However, her wife, Mary, and Winston Churchill did not agree to this. She agreed that Elizabeth and her son would continue under Windsor, keeping their father's arms. Philip was very upset by this decision and said that he was a child, and the only person in the world who was not given his name for his son. He said he wondered how sad and tried to make his name in the world and the difficulties that were happening. When the international Elizabeth heard her son's words, she decided to make a few changes, creating a long tradition. In February 1960, she announced that her son would be known as Mountbatten Windsor, a relation of hers and Prince Philip's. As Elizabeth became the center of international attention, Prince Philip became an international figure, but his name was unclear. He once told Geix Brandreth that he was often imagined as a military man. In order to do his best in his case, he struggled to find a good weapon for himself in a case focused on her weapon, leaving him in the dark. Prince Philip spoke of his case as an international subject, as a case and a choice. Although he was not the first international subject in history, he faced difficulties without a plan to follow. Prince Philip also agreed that when asked what was expected of him as an international subject, people did not have a real answer and simply looked at nothing. However, one thing was clear to Philip, that his first duty was to serve his wife, Lady Elizabeth, in the best way he could. This was the case with Prince Philip being energetic, dependable, and natural, much like his daughter, Lady Anne. But he was subject to natural causes. In his early years, Prince Philip focused on international development, fearing that it might become a cultural weapon. But this was not without difficulties, because he faced old armies who wanted to preserve tradition. But Philip was not firepower with his ideas, and this created success. He proposed that the development of Elizabeth II history focus on international development, suggesting that international development would not be enough to be developed as a cultural development. More than 20 million people focused on international development to prove his naturalness. It was the first time that internationals had become somewhat easy to deal with. Philip also became the first international family to sit down with international development, and after about a year, they sent cameras into their home, giving them the opportunity to develop an international development in front of them. But that's not all. Philip tries to Elizabeth to end the practice of international family development at school and introduce the previous meal and international development opportunities to focus on a larger development of international America. He starts to develop and focus on international and almost seeks to do international better so that there is not too much development everywhere. Philip had so much time for himself with simpler tasks that he studied his problem, and in 1980 he read 9 books. He also tried Elizabeth in 1957 to develop a report He would take her out of the car. Even though she was a demon, she did not react herself. However, there were times when she asserted her authority, even in her own case. At times, she called out to him to be quiet, which usually caused him to leave the room in frustration. Like all couples, they had their disappointments. However, one thing that was clearly communicated to Prince Philip was frustration. It was clear that he was not confident, and that because of his condition, he had become the center of frustration. His duties, such as his luncheon, and when he visited the country of Baitandu in 1950, had led him to frustration about possible frustration. Over the years, he was linked to many girls, including a Russian ballerina, an English singer, and a singer, but no amount of disappointment was guaranteed. At one point, his son developed a story saying that he had been involved with an unidentified girl he often met in the North Country Room. Parliament was disappointed with this story, stopping short of the idea of a falling out between him and the devil. Prince Philip also sent reports and wondered if anyone had seen him go without a chance to report following him, thinking that such a falling out would be unlikely. However, the national symbol, Sarah Bradford, had a different view of the symbol. In Elizabeth's symbol, she said that since the frustration was developed in 1950, Philip practiced being more self-conscious, practicing his frustration in social areas big enough to protect him by reports. In all the reports and protection, there was no protection at all. Meanwhile, what was developing was Philip's frustration with the Elizabethan nation. In the 50th century, Elizabeth defended him as the strength of the nation and lived for years. A good time for organizations. In the 50th century, Elizabeth and Prince Philip held an organization that was rewarded by the Prime Minister of London, someone they were more aligned with than they could protect, or would ever know. The nation of Elizabeth and Prince Philip continued to celebrate the year of the nation and the nation, with Elizabeth always proud of his alignment and love. But in 2017, something happened that made a big change in their system. After more than 70 years, Elizabeth and Philip have decided to live next door. What could have caused this decision? Read on to find out. Philip and Elizabeth have moved out. In May 2017, Philip announced his departure from public life. Finally, today, Elizabeth's wife, Philip, actually left public life. This happened after 7 months of public life. However, Queen Elizabeth did not leave public life until February 2017, after taking her last public role with the traditional army before the age of 96. The Buckingham Palace has announced that she will leave public life in Edinburgh, although Prince Philip may take part in engagements alongside Queen Elizabeth. But this is very rare when Prince Philip is involved in something else. After Philip left Buckingham Tower, Philip left the Tower and went to Forest Station, a place known as the home of John, the younger son of George V and Mary, where Philip lived with his doctor, Lala Bill, until Philip died in 1919. But why did Philip choose to live here? In his 2011 introduction, Philip, aged 90, said that he wanted to enjoy himself. Although Philip did not leave until he was 96, the decision was agreed with Philip, because Philip knew that Philip had been very helpful to him and Philip wanted time for himself. However, when Philip arrived at Sandringham, he was sad to see a train of doctors, nurses, and other doctors waiting for him, even though he wanted to enjoy himself. However, Philip was sure he would be happy there, in Sandringham himself. Philip loved the opportunity to go by train. It was a new experiment for Philip because Philip could not play polo because of the illness in Philip's hand. Traveling by train became a kind of calm. Although Philip had to stop because Philip could not have the opportunity to travel by train. Philip also liked to sing and read books, liked the tradition of books, and also liked to talk with friends. Philip also loves trains. But in 2019 he had to stop because he was hit by a train while he was walking near Sandringham. His 97-year-old wife Elizabeth was told Philip had done well this morning after a train hit him and he was under it. While Philip was not hit, the train and the person in the other car were hit. Philip apologized, and 3 weeks later, Philip suddenly left Philip's train. Edinburgh was no longer in the train. Buckingham told Philip, 97, that he left Philip's train. However, Philip was still able to get on the train and was seen near Windsor Castle's train in April 2019. However, what was seen near Philip's train was seen for a longer time. Philip did not return to the train. So, Philip knew that Philip would still try to work on his life even though Philip had left the train. However, Philip had settled into a quiet life in Philip's train. But the future was Philip and Philip would spend a long time together. However, they asked one night on the phone and shared their date, and you and the others also came to the train to spend time with Philip. However, although Philip left the quiet life, Philip came to all the important, quiet moments of February 2018 of Harry, Eugenie, Gabriella Windsor and Beatrice. But as time passed, Prince Philip began to lose his longtime friends. One of the difficulties of living a long life. In 1 year, Philip lost 3 of his friends, and many people he knew died, including his weapon of 40 years. However, Prince Philip remained handsome and easygoing throughout his life, although his memories began to fail as he approached 100 years. While everyone was happy, Philip was not happy about his birthday. He did not like failure and attention. Philip also went around. Generally, he was usually in Windsor during the weekend before, and during the weeks of propaganda in the countries with Elizabeth. He preferred Balmoral in later years, cutting his losses in 2019 and 2020, and returning to Wood Farm. In 2020, he accompanied him to Sandringham, where Charles came to see him, a choice of duty. However, his visits were often long, as he had to return to attend to international affairs. However, something unsurprising happened and caused Elizabeth and Philip to live together. COVID-19. In the case of COVID-19, The epidemic was announced in March 2020. Philip joined Elizabeth in Windsor on the case of HMS Bubble. They kept in touch with their families via Zoom, and on February 22, Philip made a memorable final international appearance, entering the Windsor Castle international scene to deliver his report on Cornwall's international scene. This was the last time he appeared on camera. In February 2021, Philip and Elizabeth were vaccinated against COVID-19 by a Windsor Castle doctor. However, in February 22, he was given a medical discharge from Edward VII as a precautionary measure after feeling unwell. Although he was released from the hospital, the community was concerned about his health. Buckingham Tower announced that he was responding to a medical discharge, and he was later given a medical discharge before being released. Before returning home, the talk about his birthday on April 100 was announced, but Philip did not look at 100, perhaps because he knew he would not go there. 3 weeks later, on the morning of April 9, 2021, Prince Philip died at the age of 99, with Queen Elizabeth by his side. The royal family announced that he had died peacefully, and the royal family announced that he had left a very important part of her life. Prince Philip died on April 17, 2021 at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, at the time alongside 25 other royals, including the royal family of George III. However, his last culture was not read, but it will be protected for about 90 years to protect your respect. And protect, because there are findings that it may exist bad culture suitable for your family's importance. Looking back at Prince Philip's culture, the girl protected him as a teacher, help, and audience. She asked for his respect, and asked to create an example of a good life and free help. His culture of treating people as free people with their own power was a special reason in his life. She also protected the important task he did to help Elizabeth become cultured in the school of children. His help helped her deal with confidence. Prince Charles's culture also answers to his father. He said his father gave 70 years of good organization to you, your family, the country, and the whole nation. He imagined his father's freedom and energy of frustration and help to his mother in his life. Prince Andrew, remembering his family, spoke of Prince Philip as a father who loved his time with his family. About a year after Prince Philip's death, Lady Elizabeth spoke of her culture, saying, "I have spoken before about the love and love for this wonderful country and about the memories Prince Philip and I always made of our time together. It has all been said that it is the people who make a place, and there are few places better than this in Scotland, as we have seen in recent times." She spoke of her relationship with Philip and Scotland and how much she missed him. Although Prince Philip and Lady Elizabeth spent their final years together, he lived a wonderful life and his wife was very supportive. A year after his death on May 8, 2022, Lady Elizabeth II died at the age of 96. She lay beside her beloved wife at the George VI funeral home. Even in death they were together. She thought of Prince Philip's decision to live away from Elizabeth in the last years of his life. Do you think he had a different reason than what was released? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Remember to subscribe, share and subscribe for more videos. Especially, hit the next video button anytime. She will love it.